podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Welcome to Humans of Speedway. I'm Ian Brannan, and in this episode I'm joined by Chris Durno, who, as well as taking charge of some of British Speedway's biggest events, including British Finals and Elite League Grand Finals, has also refereed at FIM level right across Europe, in fact at every major track across the continent, including at Long Track World Finals, Speedway Grand Prix qualifiers, and is taking charge of ICE Speedway meetings as well. He's got a lot of experience to share with us. I'm pleased to welcome him to Humans of Speedway, Chris Durno.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening, Ian. Pleasure to talk to you tonight.
So what are you up to at the moment? Because you're a well-known name on the refereeing circuit. People will have seen your name in the programme over many years. But where are you at this moment in your career and your involvement in Speedway?
Yeah, I'm probably moved into the sort of senior sphere now. I'm still a domestic referee in the UK. I was for a while, probably about 8-9 seasons. I moved up and was at FIM international level. But the FIM have a maximum age limit of 55. And when I reached over that, normally that's the end of your career with the FIM. But I was very fortunate. They liked how I worked and how I operated. And I was given the opportunity to become long track jury secretary. And so in all the major championships, they employ a jury with a jury president, a referee, a local delegate, and then there's a jury secretary to control the meetings. And so I've been maintained on, specifically in the long track discipline. It's where I did a lot of my FIM refereeing in that sphere. So it's maintained my interest in sort of the long track area. And I'm due to go out and do a long track final shortly in the next 4 weeks, because it's all been cleared out in France. So until they get things cleared in England, the first duty I've got on my calendar at the moment is to go to Morris's for the first long track final. Yeah,
obviously a very unusual year for everybody concerned with Speedway. Some riders getting a little bit of action now, but for the most part it's a complete write-off, and referees no exception to that.
Yeah, we're no different. We've been sitting waiting intently to try and hear some positive news. But we have to follow in line with all the government rulings. I feel for the promoters. This has been it would have been one of the best years we could have run with, the superb weather that we've had. Some of the names that are attracted to the Speedway, Robert Lambert achieving his SEC championship win. There have been so many positives for the promoters this year, and then to be hit by this virus has been absolutely devastating.
Yeah, not much we can do about it, but onwards and upwards for 2021. Let's turn to your story then, Chris. The life of a referee. How do you find your way into the box, and why was it appealing to you, and how did you get started in the first place? I think will be the first question, because it's not an area of Speedway that maybe people initially look at getting involved in, but no Speedway match can go on without you.
I used to do freelance reporting involved with Speedway, and I used to travel abroad an awful lot to watch some of the international meetings. And through those periods, I got to know some of the UK international referees at the time. Graham Brodie is a name people will know, and Graham Reeve. And I got talking to those, and that maybe set a seed. And then really I can remember there was an advert in the Speedway Star where the Speedway Control Board had said they were looking for new referees, and that still happens today. That's how the same process. They put in a sort of a small article that they're looking for referees, and then it's to apply to the Speedway Control Board. They go through the number of applications they got, and then sort of what they believe are suitable candidates. You get invited along to the SCB offices at Rugby, where you go through quite a detailed interview and test sort of process. And that's where I can remember going to the interviews and not really thinking, what will happen. And it was only when I was sort of given the option that I was selected to start training that it all become very serious. That was way back in 2002 now. And at the time, they chose a very strange way of training referees, because they chose, it was 12. It was far too many trainees back in those days. We were all tripping over each other trying to train, and it became a bit like an X Factor each week, which trainee would be called. But getting through that process, you're allocated a track, which is your training track that they change through your training period, and then you're given a mentor referee where you go around to many of his meetings, and then it really is all about getting out, doing the miles and getting to as many meetings as you can, because that's the only way you can train as a speedway referee. It's not like football, cricket, rugby, where you can go to lower levels. There is only our sort of level of sport that we can deal with. So really, you've got to get around and do the miles and do the meetings. The more meetings that you see, the more experience that you get.
Obviously, a mixture of observing there and learning. But when are you finally given a chance to get involved in a meeting? When are you let loose on the buttons? How does it work, and how do you make that progression through? I mean, are you dropped completely in at the deep end, or is it a gradual process?
Well, that's where, the hard yards go. You've got to get around, and you've got to get to see the referees until they've got a level of confidence with you. As a referee, you've got to be sure and confident that if you hand over bits of control of a meeting, that the trainees of a competent level, that you're not going to worry or cause problems with the meeting. So generally, for quite a period, you are going around shadowing referees, trying to understand what the roles and the tasks and the responsibilities are, and learning all of the rules, the regulations. And then once you get to know your referees and they've got a bit of knowledge and competency that you can get on, that's when they can start giving you some sort of second half races, and then some of the after meeting junior meetings, and then you can build up. And then once you get to a level, then they are giving you then parts of meetings, and giving you more and more responsibility, access to some of the team managers' telephone calls to see how handle them, any pre-meeting sort of issues and incidents. So it's all sort of a gradual process as you go through. It's usually around a 2-year cycle that it takes, start to finish. You're regularly tested with your mentor referee at most of your meetings, written exams, question papers at most of the meetings that you attend. And then also, as you start to progress and you're reported on every meeting, the Speedway Control Board keep on reviewing your progress. And then when they think you're at a level, they start offering you new test meetings, then when you're sort of given the lead and take the majority of the control of the meeting. And then through that 2-year program, you get more and more sort of responsibility given to you, and then given further test meetings, and then again constantly monitored all the way through the training program with reports, until you get to a point where you're given the final test meeting where you take absolute full control and responsibility. And if you get yourself through that, you will be offered a position on the Speedway Control Board of Referees. But the attrition rate is very, very high. We're probably over 50% of people who apply to be a referee don't make it through the training course. Majority, once they've taken a look at it and the amount of time, effort, and what's involved with it, they just really say it's not for me. There's a tremendous amount of travelling, time off work, obviously. And a lot of people see it's more of a job than they'd ever thought or encompassed. And so we lose a lot of people very early on when they start understanding what's demanded and involved. But then once you get through that period, then generally those trainees that get onto that stage, then we can work with them, develop them, and we usually be able to produce some good referees coming through at the end.
That is a very thorough process, isn't it? I think people will probably be quite surprised by that. I mean, you could be a qualified airline pilot in the same amount of time. I mean, it is very, very thorough indeed. But then again, it has to be, doesn't it? Because there's so much resting on your shoulders.
Yeah, I was really pleasant that you should say that, because I don't think a lot of people realise the sort of time and dedication that people put in. If you were to say me today, to go through a training program, the trainee probably expends probably in the region of £3,000 or £4,000 of his own money to be getting around, doing all that travelling to tracks, overnight stays. And that's an awful lot of dedication, time. They're burning a lot of the personal holidays to be able to do that. And but it does need that sort of time and duration to get through. It's a complicated sport. We have a very difficult rule book, and there are a lot of things that a referee deals with. It's not just the 15 heats people might imagine that a referee's involved with. Referee turns up at a meeting 2 hours before a meeting to go through all the checking all the tracks, all the licenses, the lineups, everything's in correct order to start a meeting. And probably you're also then the last person to leave the stadium as well, and so it's quite an extended period with travelling either side of it. So it is something that not too many people have got that time and freedom to be able to take on board.
There's a lot of learning involved, but perhaps one of the criticisms that comes from riders is the fact that referees don't have riding experience. I mean, what do you say to that argument, really, that there should be more ex-riders as referees who maybe know the sport in a different way?
Yeah, it's. I'll be honest with you, we've always wanted to get riders involved with refereeing. But, once I think they have a look at it and they understand what's involved, the remuneration, it's very hard to sort of attract former riders into the sport to become referees. So we would like them if we could find them. But then that is always the issue then that the referees, they don't have that riding experience. But really you gain your experience through years and years of watching meetings and incidents. And, you've got a library of memory to refer back onto. And it just becomes the more meetings that you do, the more incidents you go through, you've got that experience to make the judgment calls.
And when you go back to your first meeting, does that experience stand out for you when you were first let loose in charge of a meeting?
It's strange. It's yes and no, because I've got no memories of it. But obviously, it was my first meeting. I'd qualified as a referee. I'd done a test meeting. My final test meeting was way up in Newcastle. And I was waiting for the result, and I hadn't heard anything for a while, and I was beginning to get a little bit worried. And then I got a call from Graham Reeve, who was the Speedway Control Board manager at the time, and he asked me to go round to his house down in Droitwich. And he said, I'm going to Swindon tonight. Can you call in and see me? And I was thinking, oh, this is it. I'm going to find the news out. And I can remember knocking on his door, and he opened the door, and he says, put your hand out. And I put my hand out, and he dropped a little, what used to be a carburetor checking tool, and he put that into my hand. And I says, what are you giving me that for? And he says, because you're a referee. And that's how I was told. So I was in the back of his car going to Swindon like a Cheshire cat. We pulled into Blunsdon Stadium, and then he told me, and this is your first meeting.
Wow.
And without any sort of preparation or anything, it was Swindon versus Workington in 2002. And I can still remember, just being in a state of shock and having to literally go behind the grandstand, compose myself, remember all that training I'd done, and go in and did that meeting. But I have no recollection of the meeting. I've got to buy a video of it. I know nowadays there are people selling the old videos, but yeah, that was my first meeting. It was sort of a major milestone, but I think I can remember the score was very close to me, like 46-44, but I don't think I had too many problems. But yeah, that was my very first meeting.
You need to give Jan Steckman a call and see if he can sort you out with the DVD.
Jan seen it. I'm sure I'll be able to find a copy of that video somewhere.
And when you think back now across your career, what are the sort of standout moments that sort of come to mind for you?
It's always as you develop, you go through. I can remember when I first started the sort of the fledgling referees, sort of your target meeting, strange enough, would be something as small, but to me was a massive meeting, would be Conference League riders. And I can remember within the first season or two, I got to a level where they gave me the Conference League Riders Championship. But then you move on, and they're very good with the refereeing rule. They do try and share around the meetings if they can. And so you go through, and then you get things like pairs finals, fours finals. I can remember doing the British Championship was a very proud occasion. And then if you're lucky, you get to get on to sort of playoff finals and cup finals. And especially now with the live sort of TV, they're sort of major events. And then also, once I developed through my career, I got a very fortunate opportunity to go and apply to be an FIM referee, which meant going over to Prague and doing a complete seminar with all the other new referees across Europe and getting selected from that, and then putting onto the FIM board of referees, and then taking international meetings, which was another element, another step. I've been very privileged to be given that chance. I'll never sort of fail to recognise that, but that gave me some great pleasure to be able to travel all over the world and referee meetings.
And perhaps when people think of international meetings and refereeing international events, they're probably going to maybe think immediately of Speedway Grand Prix, but that was never something that was really available to you, was it?
Yeah, not so much. I always knew when I personally got into the FIM level, I'd almost knew before I started I wouldn't be able to get to the Grand Prix level, because we'd already got two very good referees in, if people remember the name, Jim Lawrence and Craig Ackroyd, who's still on the list now. And so there has to be a limit. That you knew we got two British UK referees at that level, so I knew it would be very unlikely I'd be able to get onto there. Jim retired it was sort of my sort of final year. But I've been very fortunate. I'd really got a good run on. We're doing long track finals. There was quite a few sort of speedway referees. They don't feel very comfortable outside the comfort zone of the usual discipline. But when you're an FIM referee, you're doing ice speedway, grass track, sidecars. And I really did sort of get involved with the long track, and I used to do a lot of the long track finals. And so I was very fortunate. You're seeing crowds out there in Germany, sort of 15, 20,000. So I was fortunate, did that. I got to do the Grand Prix Challenge out in Togliatti in Russia. So I was very happy with what I was able to get to, and then also being able to stay on and be involved with the FIM at the long track level, as well as a jury secretary. So it's been very good to me. I don't got any sort of regrets I didn't get to do a Grand Prix, because I think I had a good run anyway.
Oh yeah, I mean, some of those meetings, they're as world class as any Grand Prix, really, aren't they? The world long track finals and so on. I mean, they're massive events.
Oh yeah. You've got to treat each one with equal amount of respect, because once you get into that level, you are in the position where you're determining world champions and world championship events. So they've all got the equal amount of sort of added prestige and pressure as well involved with it.
And when you look at long track in particular, it's obviously something we don't see very much of in this country, but it's a different discipline for the riders, but a different discipline too for the referees, I imagine. And the laps clearly a lot longer. There's more riders in there. I mean, how do you have to adjust your game as a referee to cope with that versus standard speedway at, say, Newcastle, for example?
Oh yeah, it's got slightly easier now, because long track now is with 5 riders, but when I first started to referee, it was with 6 riders, and it might sound simple to people, the difference between 4, 5, and 6 riders, but it's not. 5 is tough. 6 is you're always looking everywhere around the track to make sure you've got the riders. You're counting constantly during a race to make sure you can see them. I can remember one of the first meetings I went to out in Germany, a massive track out in Muldorf, and one of the local German referees come in and talked to me, and he offered me a pair of binoculars. And I was stunned, and he said, "No, you'll need these to watch." And I thought, I can't, because if I've got a pair of binoculars, I'll only be looking in one position, and you need to have a view everywhere. So you just learn to develop and you make sure you've got sort of a vision all around the track. It's fortunate when you do an FIM meeting, you always do a practice in advance, either the day before or on the morning of the meeting, so that gives you a chance to adapt to how the controls are, the view out of the box, what you can see. And so, it's just something you just have to quickly adapt to. You don't get a lot of time. You turn up and you have to be doing that meeting that weekend.
And ice speedway, again, is something also fairly alien to many of us in this country, but it's massive in certain parts of the world. And again, something completely different with obvious extra dangers associated with that as well. I mean, as a referee, are there obviously further things that you need to check maybe before the meeting for those kind of things?
Yeah, they said it's in this modern world we deal with problems in ice speedway now. It's where the meetings can go ahead. The tracks need to be a minimum of 10 centimeters of ice to allow a meeting to go on. So the first thing you're dealing with is whether the track is in sufficient condition. Some of the ice meetings are in stadiums with man-made ice surfaces, so they're quite safe to go ahead. But then other ones, when you go to places like Sweden and Finland, I've refereed in, they are on sort of natural ice surfaces. And some of those temperatures I've refereed in, I've been refereeing in temperatures of sort of minus 25, 30. And although you're in a referee's box, it doesn't get too warm. And quite often, one of the things you've got to have with you is your credit card, because in between races, you just your breath on the window of the referee's box is freezing up. That between races, you're scraping the windows with your credit card so you can actually still see things.
You're listening to Humans of Speedway. I'm Ian Brannan, and my guest in this episode is referee Chris Durno. And Chris, before the end, is going to be taking part in Speedway Paradise as well, choosing his all-time 1 to 7, his all-time track, probably the best one he'd like to referee from as well, of course. And who would be his referee for his meeting? Is he going to choose himself? We'll find out before the end. Chris, though, one thing that comes with the territory is having to make difficult decisions. What are the most difficult decisions that you have to face up to as a referee?
It is. You probably straight away, people might think the biggest decisions that a referee make is during a meeting, whether you've got to exclude rider A or rider B. It's not. The biggest decision that a referee always will make is whether a meeting goes on or not. That is really puts you in a position where you've got a weather affected surface, and it's really is the referee's decision at the end of the day. You've got to fully consider rider safety, but at the same time, if there is any way that a track can be rectified and worked on and improved, you've got to sort of also have consideration for the promotion as well, that if at all possible, attempts should be made. And that's where you really are caught piggy in the middle, where you may have one team, say a home team, that are keen to ride, and the away team absolutely steadfast against not riding, and then you are caught in the middle of that and have to work your way through it. Talk to the riders as much as possible. Ask them if there's anything that can be done that can improve the situation. Do what you can to the track, and see if anything can be done to remedy that, and then hopefully get it to a point where you are satisfied that sufficient work has gone on, that it would be safe to start. But then it is your call then, and then you go back up to that box, and that first race in that sort of situation, your heart's in your mouth. You hope you've got it right, and you've not caused any problems or caused any extra safety risk to the riders. But then obviously you start the meeting. So that is always for me is sort of the toughest decision, as against sort of racing decisions, which you make your best judgment upon.
I suppose with racing decisions, it's a straightforward black or white if it's in the rules or not, isn't it? Whereas if a track's safe to ride, there's maybe a little bit more interpretation of opinion between different people on that one.
Yeah, you're always watching a race. You're almost judging all the time. You're trying to see incidents starting to happen before they happen. So if two riders are, in close contact, you're always focused entirely on that, and you're trying to sort of understand. Quite often you think something's going to happen, it doesn't happen, but you've got an opinion of where the riders are at that position, who was in the lead, who was challenging, who was in sort of contact with other riders, and then you've just got a level of experience then that you make an understanding, what was the primary reason for the incident that happened, and then make your judgment on that based on that and the rules and the regulations.
What about the difficult moments when it comes to keeping an eye on the racing? I imagine there's some fun moments there as well.
Oh, yeah. It's always quite difficult when you get two races in a single heat. You may have two riders battling out of the front and two at the back, and it's always where you're glancing between the two different, racing pairs, and you may be focused on the sort of the leading pair, and something may have happened on sort of the rear pair, and then you've got to try and sort of analyse what you last saw, where they were, and try and understand, what you think caused the issue, and sort of make that judgment call.
I suppose as well, it depends which track you're at, because they're all different. They all have different facilities, and some have video replays and so on, and some don't. I mean, is that something that would help you along a little bit further?
Well, even today, it's in the rule book. We're not allowed to look at videos. There is a rule at the moment that a referee should make the call without the help of a video assistance. Even there are very few tracks that do have video replays. I think there's, from memory, you can probably, I think it's Birmingham and Wolverhampton. I can't think there's many others, so there's not really the option anyway, but currently the rule book prevents us from looking at a video in a normal league meeting. If you do a TV meeting, then I think you're all aware we are provided with a monitor in the box that we can refer to. But again, we generally get the replays that the public are seeing. We're not getting sort of separate sort of replays. We have to wait until they play the replays to air, and you're sometimes not getting the replays you'd want. You always know there's one camera that will particularly help you. Maybe going across, looking into a bend where something may have happened, and it's not always that the director chooses to give you that view, because sometimes controversy helps television. And so quite often you can make a call, and then lo and behold, they'll be showing you a view that you've probably not seen in making your decision. But I don't think, you always have memories of certain meetings where you're thinking there's maybe been some call that's gone wrong. But I do feel the standard of refereeing is not too bad in this country compared. And I think we get the vast majority of the decisions correct.
I'm looking at one or two of the stories from I think the stories from the Speedway Star from a little while back, but one situation that presented itself that sort of caught the eye was one where you were refereeing the Tyne Tees Trophy, and this was at Brough Park, and going back to what you were saying about deciding about whether the meeting should go ahead or not, and it ended with you reporting all 12 riders to the SCB.
Yeah, it was one of those occasions where, we got some poor weather, and we'd worked on the track. We'd done everything recommended of the riders, and the consensus of opinion was they were going to go with it. And so then they went in the changing rooms, and then once they got behind locked doors, there was people who were speaking louder than others that sort of swelled the riders into say not even considering allowing to have it a go, even though there'd been an awful lot of track work done. And so all we did then at that occasion, if you take that course of action, there will be implications with that. And so they stood by their decision, refusing to ride. So that was sent to a court of inquiry in the SCB, which ruled that the riders were on an incorrect stance, and I can't remember the punishment, but it probably would have been fines and things like that were carried out. So yeah, not a very nice thing to have happened, but on that occasion it was one of those where at least the thought was they should have at least had a look and had a go at it.
And there was another story that I saw that, and this was quite a while back, so you'd probably only been in the game a few years, I suppose, by this point, but Matt Ford pleading with the authorities for you to be kept away from their meetings because they were out of the playoffs.
Yeah, I think I had a run of meetings where I made decisions that didn't please Matt Ford very much. I think there was some headline somewhere, Durno is banned from pool. And immediately what the Speedway Control Board do is they send you down straight away then. Nobody can sort of say those things. But I think, that was a long time ago. And, now every time I go down to Paul now, walk straight into Matt Ford's office. He holds no thoughts or grudges from those sort of times. And so, you go through those periods where some people think, they've just had a run that you've maybe got some issue against some rider or some club, but I don't think there are many referees go into meetings with that sort of view.
You're listening to Humans of Speedway. I'm Ian Brannan, and my guest in this episode is Chris Durno, having a bit of a referee fest in this one, talking about the rules, the regulations, and life in the box. And Chris also going to get involved in Speedway Paradise at the end as well, choosing his all-time dream meeting. Find out what's involved in that. But first of all, let's have a look at some of the unusual rules. I mean, do these come up every now and again? The rules that are not often applied, but they are in the rule book, and you've got to go by the letter. What sort of examples can you give us, Chris?
Yeah, so I've had a few incidents in the last year or two where would it go? I had a rider start a race without his gloves. And I was eagle-eyed enough to have seen that he'd got himself in a pickle in between races, and came out in such a rush he'd come out without his gloves on. He obviously, he took part in the race, and he was in an unsafe condition, so he was disqualified. I've had another one where I had a strange call from the pits that a rider who had a machine examined before the start of the meeting, he wasn't very happy with it. So halfway through a meeting, he decided to pull a second bite out of his van and go straight out and race on it. And obviously that had not been scrutinized and checked, had to disqualify him. And so, yeah, you do get some weird and wonderful ones where, they're in the rule book, don't apply them very often, but when it happens, you have to go back to the black and white and apply them.
Yeah, you've got to have the eyes in the back of your head, really. I mean, we did an episode recently with Shane Parker, and we were talking about referees, and he was very complimentary to you, by the way. But he was saying that probably nowadays, because things are a little bit faster than ever they have been, that it might be worth having another one on the field as well as in the box. Would that be something that would help you out, do you think?
Anything, I always say, anything that helps us to get to the correct decision is it'll be a good help, a good guide. As you say, if we could have replays, anything that could sort of give us some sort of a second view or anything like that. As long as we get the correct decision, it's a good thing, in my opinion. So I'd support anything that sort of assists us.
Now, I've got a bit of a mailbag for you, which is definitely a first. The first one is from Martin Coleman, who says, say hi to Chris for me. Ask him how much did he enjoy watching Matty Godden score a hat-trick in a 4-1 win at Wycombe, only to be snapped online at the front row in the home end because you couldn't get a ticket for the away end.
Yeah, no, Martin. This is I'd followed a football team, and as I said, I couldn't get into the away end, so I managed to get into the home end, and there was a picture in the local paper where I was the person directly behind a player celebrating that. I got a mugshot in a local newspaper that people picked up on and sent all the way around. So yeah, that's that was something that doesn't happen very often.
Right, here's a Speedway one for you. This is from Ian Lapworth, who says, how much discretion does a referee have to bring all 4 riders back for a rerun following a crash? Sometimes it looks like a racing accident, but it seems that someone has to be excluded. The result of the meeting can hinge on such a decision.
Yeah, this is always a tough one, because I imagine he's talking is once the riders have gone around the second bend and then you get an incident. We all talk about 50-50 incidents, and that there are instances that happen that it is very difficult to make a decision on. But I think the majority of referees, once you've gone around the second bend, it really is sort of decision time. And there has been odd occasions where, decisions been taken to rerun a race because no fault could be attributed. But it's quite dangerous territory, because once you do that sort of thing, it sets a massive precedent. That then every time there's a crash during a meeting, people will come back and say, well, that was done on that TV meeting where on lap 3 it was rerun all 4. It sends a very sort of dangerous precedent. So it should be very, very rare occasions where there's absolutely no way you can attribute blame to one rider or the other.
One here from Steve Hayward, who says, top man is Chris. I'm lucky enough to have worked with all the UK refs in the announcers box at Berwick, and he's one of the best. I think it's quite complimentary, doesn't really require much from you. One from Gary Schofield, who says, can you ask Chris, what's your favourite and least favourite tracks to referee at? And this can be anywhere, I suppose, because haven't you refereed at pretty much everywhere in Europe, all the major tracks?
Yeah, I always try to get around. I am basically, I'm a big Speedway supporter as well as a referee. I still love the sport. I still go to as many meetings as I can, and I travel as much as I can. I'm almost like a Speedway ground hopper, as they call them in football terms. I try to get to every stadium I can. I've visited about 292, I think it is now. I want to get to 300 before I finish. But it gives you ability to get around, and even, if I can travel abroad, it's a strange thing. You always try and see the local referee and get into the box and have a look around. But the best boxes generally are always sort of elevated boxes. That you're up in the sky where you're looking down on the track, so you can get some perspective across the track, as riders move going down the back straight. And so you don't want boxes where, you've got people walking in front of you, which a lot of the UK boxes are that way, where, somebody can just sort of distract you or walk across you. So The best boxes, my favourite box was always Oxford Cowley Stadium, because you were above the main grandstand looking directly down. You used to lean out of the window with the control box next year. I found that a very good view, very natural. The new Bellevue box, although it's in a good position, they didn't put a lot of consideration in for referees, even though it was a new stadium, because we're sort of crouched. There's a window there, but the height of the window is not sort of ergonomically suitable, so you're sort of in between, sort of crouching and leaning down to get a good view. And so every time you referee, you end up with bruises on your head as you stand up and bang your head on the windowsill there. But again, it is a good view. But then you are other tracks, I don't want to knock the tracks, but places like Poole, where you're in the back of a grandstand, wherever there's a close finish and you've got a row of fans sitting directly out the window and they all stand up, as they cross the line, and I'm directly behind them. Ipswich is the same. There's quite a few where we don't have the best of views. There are some tracks where you're not in line with the start. Wolverhampton's a classic one. You are sort of in the first bend and you are trying to make judgments on movement on the starts and close finishes. So, a lot of the boxes that we operate aren't perfect, but we can't change them, and we have to deal with them and react to them. But I always do like the boxes that are sort of placed on top of sort of grandstand roofs, so you've got no sort of obstructive view at all.
Here's a message from Nigel Pearson, who says,
Which
"Chris
one,
is a
the
great
football manager."
Well, no, this is the commentator in this particular instance. He says, Chris is a great guy. Send him my best regards, please. So consider that done. Jason Harold says, one of the best on the buttons is Chris, not to mention the elastic band.
Yeah. And well, I can tell you a little story about Nigel Pearson then, because I'm sure he might remember this. Is the standard referee's attire was always a white shirt with a tie. And there was one meeting at Wolverhampton where Nigel Pearson went out in the middle of the meeting to get his usual glass of Guinness. And as he walked back into the box, he tripped over and he emptied a complete glass of Guinness all over my nice white refereeing shirt. So thank you, Nigel, for that. I do remember that day.
Unexpected hazards of the referee's box. One from Speedway Social. And this was, I think this was a discussion they were having based on something that happened in a Polish meeting recently. And it's just, I think it's a general scenario that often happens. But if yellow moves, for example, and then red touches the tapes, was it already a false start by the time red touched them because of yellow's movement? Yeah,
it's quite debatable, these sort of things at the starts at the moment. There are many ways you can look at it, because a rider doesn't have to touch the tapes to be disqualified. You can disqualify a rider for effectively delaying the start because you've had to, you're conscious that there was some slight movement, so you delay raising the tapes. And so you can disqualify that rider for being the cause. But when you're in that sort of situation, I know it upsets a lot of people, but the rules are the rider shouldn't move before the start. So a rider, I know it is very difficult. They're on tender edges with the clutches and everything, but they shouldn't really attempt to start a race due to another rider moving. And in that incident, I can see. I watched it myself. The guy off the inside gate did a slight nudge, settled. That had got the guy off the second gate to go through. So I know what the referee did in that case. He disqualified the actual tape toucher, and which was unfortunately the second person to move. And then he took the additional action of warning the rider that had moved. So he got some sort of punishment for what he'd done. But I can see it's a difficult call, and there's two views on that. But I think in Poland, in that occasion, the referee just went with the rule book. It was the rider that touched the tapes that he disqualified. If he hadn't have touched the tapes and they had both been moving, would that be a reason, if you'd let the tapes go, would that be a reason to call it all back for an unsatisfactory start? Or? Yeah, it's something like that, yeah. I think a lot of referees now, we sort of, in the past, we used to hit the red lights as soon as you saw movement out of the starts now. But I think a lot of referees now, they sort of, if they do see some sort of movement, you take a measured judgment, because quite often if somebody has gambled at the start, they've double clutched, they thought they're going to go and they've pulled the clutch back in, and when the tapes go, they move, but then they suddenly get punished. They're at the back of the field going into the first corner. So I think a lot of referees now, they do sort of leave stopping a race a little bit longer to understand that what was the cause of the movement? Has he benefited out of it? Is he leading the race, or he's at the back of the race? And then if he is at the back of the race, you can let it run, and then you can still penalise him with a warning afterwards. But I think a lot of referees have changed the way that they've done it before. If you saw anybody move at the start, you used to hit the red straight away. But I think now they give a sort of a delayed sort of decision process to ensure that if somebody has moved, that if he has gained an advantage, then you stop the race, and if not, you let the race continue.
You're listening to Humans of Speedway. Welcome along. I'm Ian Brannan. My guest in this episode is Chris Durno, British Speedway referee, also involved in the FIM. And we're at the section now where we're going to do Speedway Paradise, which, if you will, it's a bit like Desert Island Discs, but with a bit more shale. And we ask our guests to come up with their dream Speedway meeting, really, picking the perfect venue, the perfect track for the racing, and who would take part in that meeting as well. So, Chris, over to you. We're going to start designing this dream meeting of yours right now. First of all, though, which track would you choose purely for the racing? Any track you like.
Well, I don't think I'd have to. I'll give you two answers to this. I don't think I'd have to travel too far to start with, because I think the new Bellevue race track it is fantastic. I know when they were leading up to build the new track up at Manchester, Chris Morton and the promotional team, they travelled all over the world to look at what they thought was sort of best stadiums and best racetracks, and try to incorporate that. And I really find the Bellevue racetrack a spectacular racetrack. It's almost, I don't want to sort of take my next visit there, but it is quite easy to referee at, because it's so big and so wide. The racing lines that the riders have got, it's very rare you'll see a rider fall and go into the fence. It's so sort of wide there, and even as a referee, it's one of the tracks you can really admire the racing on. You get a good view from that box. You've got the best view in the stadium, and sort of the racing lines that they can pull there is amazing. So that track is excellent. And the other one I'd throw in, I think nobody's probably even heard of, but 2 years ago I went to a track in Hungary, Nagy Halas, in the middle of nowhere, a tiny village. But it was one of those occasions you sometimes walk into a stadium and you look at the track and you just get a feel for it, the shape of it, the sort of banking. And that was one of those days. And the meeting I saw there, I think it was an SEC challenge, was just tremendous racing. So yeah, I think if there's some thought gone into the track and there's some sort of banking involved with it, I think you get good racing. But I think we are blessed in the UK with the Bellevue track. I think it is amazing. And
it's an interesting point you make, because obviously you are working, you're running the Speedway meeting, you're the referee, but as a neutral Speedway fan, it's great that you can appreciate good racing when you see it as well.
Yeah. It's when you were a fan, you'd be on the terraces and you're more like get in there, get stuck in, knock him off, have him. In the referee's box, you are completely the polar opposite. You are like, stay away from him, don't get close, come on, please, stay away. So you have a different viewpoint as a referee, but you still do. There are occasions when a race has sort of finished, you'll turn to the announcer and he'll just say, that was just amazing, incredible race. You are trying to officiate, but there are times when you can just admire sort of the racing that you've been witness to.
So you've chosen the track that they'd race on, but which stadium would those tracks possibly go in, do you think?
Oh, yeah, okay. Again, a couple of, if I could go back in time, the old Wembley. I was fortunate.
It gets a lot of votes.
Yeah, if I was of an age, I did get to see the 1978 and the incredible 1981 final, but that place no longer exists. I'm a big admirer of sort of the stadiums that have been fortunate to build in Poland, and sort of the atmosphere. But for me, as a Speedway stadium, I think Togliatti, because it's not so much as a stadium, it's a complete complex. There are sort of workshops in there, schools, fitness centres. It's really is a sort of a amazing sort of complex stadium. So if I could put the Bellevue track into Togliatti, I think I'd have a winner, because one of the poor restrictions that Togliatti has to deal with is they run ice speedway there, and so that means that they have to have a sort of a flat track surface so they can flood it and freeze it. And so I don't really think the Togliatti race surface is of the best racetrack. So yeah, if I could merge the Bellevue track with Togliatti, that would please me.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing we're looking for. Good stuff. And first time that Togliatti's been mentioned, I think, as well. Yeah, Wembley is a popular choice. So you're 1 to 7 then. It can be any rider from any era, alive or not, no points limits. It's totally down to you. Who would be in that team?
Okay, then probably the first person I put in the team is probably the man that possibly made me go to Speedway in the first time, because again, of my age, I used to, back in the 70s, listen to the old World of Sport coverage of major meetings, and there was the Majors, the Collins and the Briggs, and there was another fella called Ollie Olsen. Yeah. And he transferred to one of my local tracks, Coventry, and I think it was sort of that name that made me go to my first ever meeting. And so he really was one of the sports legend. He joined Coventry after a dispute from Wolverhampton, where he didn't really want to be there. And if anybody looks at his statistics, he didn't score. I think he scored 1 bonus point in the entire year. He was an individual rider. He came over and was a super captain and helping all the other riders and borrowing bikes. So definitely Ollie Olsen. Next, I'd have in my team Thomas Golub. He was sort of much maligned when we started to get the original Grand Prix. He was always commentators used to treat him as the black villain, but he was an amazing motorcyclist. Some of the things that he did, some of the rides he pulled off was just amazing. So I definitely have Thomas Golub in my team. The next is somebody that's still going around, and I think everybody talks about, and that's why I'd have him in my team, and that's Nicky Pedersen. A real showman. When you go to a meeting with Nicky and you usually come back talking about something, he's always involved with sort of controversy. He's a very hard rider, but you remember him, and I think he's been a sort of a fantastic sort of entertainment artist through our sport. I can remember when I refereed him in England, it used to be hearts in your mouth, because when Nicky hit that first bend, he just used to go straight across it, straight out to the fence, no matter where anybody else was. But I think overall he's been a superb servant to the sport, and he's still riding today.
Have you had to have any conversations with him on the phone about ride? Because he's well known for some quite ruthless moves.
Yeah, you don't get conversations. You get very sharp, short, shouted messages to yourselves. But he's a good rider, because he doesn't sort of carry them grudges, because he'll bump into you another time, and that's all forgotten. He's always been sort of pleasant. He'll always shake your hands with you. And so, I've got no sort of malice against him. I think he's great, and it would have been fantastic for him to be riding in the UK this year. He was due to ride for Sheffield. That would have been a major coup, and so I hope Sheffield can find some way of keeping him in there the next year. I'd also just mentioned as well, when I mentioned Nicky, he had a brother once, and I think his brother was even crazier. And I actually used to travel across. He used to ride for Peterborough. Again, it must be something in the family, in the DNA, because his brother was just as crazy as well. So yeah. And then following in the team, then I'd pick a pairing and to ride together, because the Hancock and Hamill partnership, I thought have been fantastic. Real showmanship, brought over the American pizzazz. First came over to sort of Cradley and developed and became, sort of world beaters. And then I've ridden together Coventry, I think at Oxford and places, and real showmanship superstars. I've really sort of been fortunate to see them sort of go through their careers start to finish, but those two have been absolutely box office for me.
Yeah, great on the track and great off the track as well, and especially in the modern world, with one of the first sort of really get involved in all the branding and all that kind of stuff in the modern way. So I think that's 5 riders now. Chris, you've got 2 reserve positions left. Who are you going to put in your all-time team then?
Bomber Harris. Again, I like racers, absolute racers, and I think that's the only way you can describe Chris Harris. He's done so many things. He's got so many memories for people. He's a true bulldog. I've got very close. I'm quite friendly with him because he does the long track now, and he asked me to do his testimonial, which was a nice day for him. So again, Chris Harris. And then my final rider will be a rider going back a long time now. When I first started to go, was an Australian rider at Coventry called Gary Guglielmi. He was, again, very hard, forceful rider. And just when he was on the point of breaking into massive international time, he had a major discretion where he was caught taking drugs back into Australia when he went back for the winter, and that unfortunately saw the end of his career. And I had a very nice chance last winter where he made his first visit back to the UK for, I think it was 20 plus years since that sort of indiscretion, and I was given the chance to sort of interview him. He was sort of my favourite rider from sort of my early days, and it was an amazing emotional evening to go through, and he opened up about that those sort of times and those what happened. And so Gary Guglielmi goes into the bottom end of my team.
That's a cracking lineup there, and nice to have some riders suggested that haven't been mentioned before as well. I think the next question might be the most tricky for you, because this is the question where we ask, who would referee your meeting?
Well, me.
Straightforward, why not?
No, I'm always, I understand once the guys get to sort of the international FIM level, that really is a level of sort of pressure. People may have memories of good referees from beyond, but they don't deal what modern referees deal with TV coverage and replays, and especially social media. Everybody's got an opinion on every decision. So what the modern referees are going through today, everything they do is analysed, scrutinised and commented on. So I know the guys that are sort of doing that sort of the FIM level. So for me, I've always thought Chris Durno. He's in his final year this year. He's reaching 55, and he's just got a calmness, a mannerism, well respected by the riders. But then again, I always have to say, there are two referees on the FM, Craig Ackroyd and Christina Turnbull. They're at that level. I've got a great deal of admiration. So, yeah, Chris Durno I'd have to referee the meeting.
Yeah, an outstanding referee for sure, and will be missed when he perhaps drops down from the GPs. Another tricky question for a referee then. If you're going to change one rule of the sport, which one would that be?
I see and talk to a lot of supporters, and I listen to supporters, and I think one thing we've got to work on and improve it's sort of the starts. It's the frustration meetings take too long. There are too many restarts. If that's one area that if we could get some sort of way of defining a better way of involved with even starting races, we're dealing with start and take technologies that were developed in the 1930s, and we're still using that technology. There's got to be a way where we can ensure better, fairer, more impartial starts. I'd do anything to support that. It is one of our areas that irritates people the most, people trying to get an advantage at the start of the meeting. I'm always watching the Speedway from around the world, and I have noticed now that the way that the Polish league is operating at the moment, where I think they've gone some way to improve things at the start line, where they have the start marshal with a headset on, so the referee's got direct contact with him. Their start marshals seem to have a lot more empowerment. They ensure that the riders are brought up to the tapes. You should be up to a maximum of 10 centimetres from the tapes, but in realism, how many times do you really see that? They ensure that they are lined up totally perpendicular to the tapes. The tapes are a correct height. There are too many tracks in the UK where the bottom tape, they can almost push the front of the wheel underneath before they even touch the tapes. And so I think what Poland's doing, it only takes another 5-10 seconds after sort of the clock zeroed down, that start marshal's told by the referee, go to gate 3, pull him in, go to 2, go back to 1, and that little bit of extra time pays dividends, because I think we're getting less reruns in Poland now, down to that sort of working combined team with the start marshal and the referee being in communication.
And there's no reason that can't happen either, because it's very easy to sort that out, isn't it, in this day and age?
Well, it is. It is cost. I appreciate to the promoters it is some sort of cost. And also across the world now, every meeting you see everywhere seems to have a 2-minute clock, but we still don't operate a 2-minute clock in the UK. Even our rule says at the moment we don't really have a 2-minute time allowance, because our UK rule says the rider has 2 minutes once he's in the direction of the race. So that means they can come out of the pits at 1 minute 58 seconds, and then we have to watch them slowly trawl around the track and then go and pull up to the line, choose the route he wants, digs it. So effectively our 2 minutes can be anything from 3 to 4 minutes, and if we got a clock on the line, the riders know that's when it is, the fans can see it, and that will bring slicker, cleaner meetings. But again, it's got an expense attached to it that the promoters have to take, and so I'd like to see those sort of bits of expense done, so we can get fewer restarts, and that way we can get quicker meetings.
And the final big question really is, who would be the opposition for your all-star team? Who do you think is going to put up the best fight, get everybody off their seats and provide the entertainment?
You always think of champions and things like this, and the team that I came up with was Ipswich 1998, because if we go back, that was the year when, it shows the difference in the team strengths nowadays, because Ipswich were able to put a team together with Tony Ricardson, Thomas Golub, Chris Louis. They got a rising star, Scott Nichols. I think it was Svab and Cloughton at the bottom end. But that was an amazing top end. It was through, I think, Magda Louis had got the contact with Golub to be able to bring him over. He was a major sort of name and draw for all the crowds. And they went through the year, I'm sure they were like league and cup champions. Unfortunately, it was 1998 and Sky TV didn't start until 1999, so that wasn't captured on the TV. But I always remember that side, with the top end of Ricardson, Golub and Louis was just an amazing team. And
sounds like an amazing meeting you've put together as well. Thanks for taking part in our Speedway Paradise there. Chris Durno on Humans of Speedway. And good luck when you get back in the box. You're saying that's coming very, very soon. Obviously, we're not sure what's going to pan out exactly between now and the end of this season, but it looks like 2021 before we're all going to be heading back to the track for the majority of us, and you must be looking forward to that.
Yeah, and I hope for all the fans as well that we get some form of a speedway before we finish this year, and then hopefully we get some sort of normality next year, and then hopefully I'd love to see our sport get a boost. We can see the potential when we look across the Polish league, what is possible. It's the same product, and if we do things right and in the right way, we can really get this sport going again.
My thanks to Chris Durno there for letting us inside the mind and the box of the referee in this episode of Humans of Speedway. Thanks to you as well for listening. If you haven't checked out all the other previous episodes yet, then that's something you can do at your leisure. Scott Nichols, Nigel Pearson, Speedway author Jeff Scott, promoter Neil Machin, Peter Oakes, and a hero of so many clubs in Britain, Shane Parker, all featured as part of the series. Don't forget to leave us a rating, and you can also drop us a little review on whichever app you're using. And if you've got any questions, you can contact us on our social media pages as well, at Speedway Humans on Twitter and on Facebook. Just search for Humans of Speedway. We'll also share any clips of upcoming episodes and things like that on there as well, and you can ask questions sometimes ahead of the recording. So make sure you follow those social accounts too to get involved. It'd be great to hear from you. And until next time, stay safe and see you soon on Humans of Speedway.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of statistics, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and an enormous selection of players and stat options are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million football fans who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/get100 and use code GET100. That's code GET100 at prizepicks.com/get100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.